Item. SCP-782. Object Class. Safe. Special Containment Procedures. All known copies of SCP-782 are to be kept at storage site. Copies are currently in storage. The total number of existing copies is unknown. Mobile Task Force Kappa, the Bookworms, is tasked with searching libraries, used bookstores and thrift stores for copies still in circulation. Copies of SCP-782 must be stored in a low humidity environment to discourage decomposition. If possible, personnel handling copies of SCP-782 should not be capable of reading English. English literate personnel are to treat SCP-782 as a Gabriel 7 level mimetic threat. Description: SCP-782 is an anonymously published self-help book entitled 3 Easy Steps to an All-New You. No author is listed, and its publisher, closed in 199. As was a so-called vanity publisher, none of the individuals associated with it claim to remember such a book, or indeed most of the books they published. In addition, all of its records were destroyed when its CEO burned down the company's head office in an attempt to commit insurance fraud. Due to these factors, SCP-782's unknown origins should not be considered paranormal in nature. When SCP-782 is read by an individual capable of understanding its content and message, it has a Type P mimetic effect upon the victim. SCP-782 alters the chemistry, connections, and even architecture of the brain. SCP-782's effect occurs in 3 stages. The 3 stages occur in various areas of the body over time, generally taking 7-14 months, though, rarely, it can happen in over less than a single month. The first stage of the effect is that the victim begins to feel numbness in random places on the body. The numbness eventually fades. The second stage of the effect is that the victim is no longer able to control those areas. The affected individual has no way of influencing the movement of the affected body parts beyond manipulating the body parts the affected areas are attached to. The victim is still capable of sensation through affected areas. Essentially, the affected areas can send signals to the brain, but not receive them. The second stage is typically brief, generally lasting 1 to 3 days. In the third and final stage of SCP-782's effect, the affected areas begin to engage in autonomous movement. The movement of the affected areas may be completely at odds with the desires of the victim, and affected body parts frequently engage in activity uncharacteristic of the victim's personality. The body parts will attempt to achieve goals and perform tasks independent of the desires of the victim. If hands, mouth and throat all become affected, communication becomes difficult, if not impossible. Once communicative organs become affected, they will almost invariably begin to attempt communication on behalf of another mind. At this point, it becomes clear that the various affected body parts are not independent from each other, but controlled by another will. Eventually the total body is controlled by the secondary will, which becomes the dominant consciousness of the body. The new personality shares no memories with the old, although they will share all of its subconscious memories, that is, skills and language. The new personality is no more likely to be malicious than a member of the general population.